All right, hello and welcome to this Monolith Beginner Guide. This is a companion video for the Maxroll article of the same name. The Monolith of Fate is an endgame system in Last Epoch and is the primary endgame system in Last Epoch. And so once you get to endgame, you will spend the vast majority of your time in the system. So it's good to know how it works, what it's doing, what you should be actually working towards while you're in the Monolith. And that's what we're going to cover here today. So let's start with, what is the Monolith? The Monolith is the, as I said, primary endgame system. You access it by going into the end of time and going all the way to the right, and then there's like a gate, and you can go into that gate, and then you will have reached the Monolith of Fate. Now, the Monolith is set up into timelines. These are islands that are actual physical islands in the game that you must travel to and complete. You have to defeat certain timelines to progress farther in them. You'll start at the bottom, and then you will work your way up. You can go either right or left on some of these, but you're working your way all the way through, or at least through some of these, to try and unlock more timelines to push further and eventually get into Empowered, which is the stronger version of the timeline where some of the best rewards exist. Okay, so in the timelines, you will click on one and you will find yourself looking at echoes, and echoes are the mapping. This is the mapping system. So you go to a timeline, you open the timeline, there's a monolith sitting there, and you just click on it, and from there a web will appear, and it'll look kind of like the one that's on the screen right now, and you will choose the different echoes that you want, and they'll have objectives, and you'll follow, you'll go into those, and it's just a map, and then you'll clear the objective, you'll clear the monsters that you want to clear, and once you've cleared the objective, you have completed the echo, and you'll move forward from there. You can choose your own path where you're going to go on the echoes or on the timeline, and you can choose the rewards that you want. So it's a highly customizable experience for you as the player. Now, each echo has rewards, but it also has modifiers that will make the enemies stronger. So for example, we have on here, enemies deal significantly increased elemental damage. This is a empowered versions. They don't normally start quite at this high, but this gives you an example of the kind of things that you can come across in the Monolith as you're choosing echoes. Pay close attention to the modifiers because they can be very difficult, especially if you don't have the appropriate gear. You also get item rarity and experience from these modifiers, and typically these stronger modifiers will give more rarity and more increased experience gain. But they also have, on top of that, their own specific echo reward, and they give timeline stability. Now, the echo reward can be things like uniques, it can be gold, it can be XP, it can be a lot of things. So make sure to check out what those rewards are and look for the ones that fit you the best for what you're trying to get. Alternatively, you might want to look at the stability, because stability is very important in the echoes or in the timelines, because stability is what is required to eventually do the quest echoes and ultimately fight the boss of the timeline. And once you've fought and defeated the boss, you have completed that timeline, and you can then choose the next timeline that you want to go towards, as well as get a blessing, which is a permanent increase in either power or some sort of item gain for your character. Let's see, did I go for it? I did. I went a little ahead of the guide here. So yeah, so echo objectives, special echo rewards. By the way, yeah, we should mention this. So echo rewards, like I said, can be uniques, but you can actually target farm uniques through the special echo rewards, because each timeline has a set of, they all have generic unique rewards, like a unique will drop from this, but they also have specific ones. So for example, Fall the Outcast will have some echo rewards be a unique bow or quiver, and then the Last Ruin will have unique relics. So if you're looking for a unique relic, you go to the Last Ruin. You can significantly increase your chance of finding the unique relic you're looking for if it's a random world drop and not a drop off of a boss specifically. Do note that these get stronger the higher up you go in timelines, and like if you're empowered and doing corruption, we'll talk about corruption later. So at a base level, these won't be showing up very often, but eventually you can see them a lot more. All right, stability, we talked about this, but now you can see what it actually is doing. So stability, there's a stability bar on every timeline, and once you've reached this third, what's currently locked, it currently shows a, what do you call it? It's locked. once you've passed that stability level, you can now do all 3 of the quest echoes. There are 3 for every timeline, and you have to do the first, you have to do them all in order. So you have to do the first one, the second one, and then the third one. On empowered, you only have to do the third one, which is the boss fight, but on normal, you have to do all 3. And again, on the third one, you get a boss fight, you defeat the boss, you've defeated the timeline. You now can choose to go forward to another timeline or keep going this one if you want to. Let's see, get that cover the same thing I just said. Okay, so bosses themselves, every timeline has their own specific boss that's only to that timeline. And you only find them at that timeline. If you want to farm him, you got to go to that timeline. Every boss has a set of blessings it drops. These can be power, like void resistance. Like you get void resistance. That's a permanent character power gain that persists throughout the entire game. It's not just for the monolith, it's for everything. So if you go in the arena, you still have it. And you can have 1 blessing from each timeline. So you choose one from, you know, the first timeline, then you can choose another from the second timeline, and they're all exclusive to each timeline. So you can't get the same one twice or in a different slot. So each one has its own slot, and then you'll fill it with a blessing from that timeline, and then you can get one from another one. And you can farm these and replace blessings to get the one you want at a higher roll. You can do this as much as you want to. So you can get all your best blessings eventually from all the different slots by killing the timeline bosses that reward those particular blessings. Bosses also drop uniques that are exclusive to them. So if you want to know what uniques particular bosses drop, definitely check out our timeline boss guides. And make sure that if your build that you're playing requires a particular unique, that you know where it drops from, if it's random or if it's a boss, so that you can go and target farm it. This game is far more target farmable than most games in the genre. So there are many ways to get these things, and if it's a timeline boss guide, it's pretty simple. You just go to that timeline, and as long as you hit the appropriate parameters for difficulty of that timeline, you will be able to try and get that to drop, and do it enough times and you will. Okay, that leads us to corruption in the Shade of Orbis. This stuff shows up in normal timelines, but it tends to be more applicable to empowered, but we'll cover the basics here. So when you are going through your webs, excuse me, you're going to come across these echoes that look like the one on screen. If you go into these, you will fight a boss. He's called the Shade of Orbis. He shows up on all timelines. So it's not like the normal timeline bosses. This guy's all over the place. And he is a very interesting fight because there's a lot of different versions of him. Check out the Shade of Orbis boss guide to get more information on that. But he has different element types and different attacks he can do. So it's you'll almost never get the same fight twice. It's always gonna be varied in some way, different skill set for the Shade. If you kill the Shade, you will reset that web. So the timeline web that you've been building out will reset back to fresh, and you will also increase the corruption on it, which increases the health and damage of enemies, but also gives better rewards and better stability. You can also decrease corruption later on by doing shades closer to the starting point, but you won't have to worry about that until you start to stack some corruption. It's basically a mechanic to allow you to increase or decrease corruption and therefore difficulty as you want to. We tend to use it mostly for increasing corruption though. So we want to make the game harder, but also give more rewards. So we kill the Shade of Orbis and we make it harder. In normal timelines, you max out at 50 corruption, and there's honestly no real good reason to do that. This is much more of a mechanic for empowered, which will start at 100 corruption and then scales infinitely. But that's how it works. This is our customize your difficulty experience option in the Monolith of Fate for the deeper endgame portions of it. Okay, that covers everything for the basics of the Monolith beginner guide. Please do check out the more advanced stuff as well if you're intrigued about what it's going to be like to go forward and what some of the like higher level rewards and difficulty look like in the Monolith. Is a pretty complex system that is probably only going to get deeper as we go, as the game develops. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great time in Last Epoch, and I'll see you all again real soon.